guys, it's me again. This is the first of we're going over to kind of like the Americas kind of thing. So yeah, here we are with Canada. Just doing history today, but it will be a longish one. As the first people in Canada had crossed the Bering Straits from Asia, and as in the north, the Inuits lived by hunting seals, walruses, and whales. There was also caribou in there somewhere, and while on the west coast people hunted deer, bear, and beaver. But they did also fish, kind of thing. While on the plains, the people lived by hunting buffalo, while in the east people grew crops like beans, squash, and sunflower seeds. And the first Europeans to reach Canada is believed to be the Vikings, who kind of first arrived in 986 on the name of Bjarni Jofferson. Sorry if I said that wrong, but he was blown, of course, by a storm and spotted a new land. However, he sailed away without landing, and in 1001 a man named Leif Erikson landed in the new land, which he named Vinland, which was a part of Canada. However, Erikson did not stay permanently, but as later on the Vikings did establish a colony in North America, but they abandoned it due to conflicts with those already living there. However, after the Vikings, Canada was forgotten about till the end of the 15th century, as in 1497, the English King Henry VII sent an Italian named John Calibut across on an expedition across the Atlantic to Newfoundland, as Calibut discovered rich fishing waters off the coast of Canada. And in 1534 and in 1535 and 36, a Frenchman named Jacques Cartier, who lived from 1491 to 1557, sailed on 2 expeditions to Canada. And on the 10th of August 1555, on St. Lawrence's Day, he sailed into St. Lawrence River, which he named after the saint. But there was no permanent European settlement made in Canada till the early 17th century. And in 1603, a Frenchman named Samuel de Champlain, who lived from 1567 to 1635, sailed up the St. Lawrence River. And a year later, in 1604, he founded the royal port of Acadia, or Nova Scotia. And in 1608 he founded what is now Quebec. As the name Quebec is believed to be an Algonquian word meaning the narrowest part of a river. And in 1642 the French founded Montreal, as a new colony in Canada was called New France. In 1685 the population of New France was about 10,000, while by 1740 the population was 48,000. In early 17th century, the French missionaries led by Jesuits attempted to convert the natives to Christianity, without too much success to say the least. And meanwhile the French settlers traded with the natives for furs and farmed the land. But they also brought diseases from Europe like smallpox, which those living there had no resistance to. But then the English were also interested in Canada. In 1610, Henry Hudson discovered Hudson Bay. In 1611, his crew mutinied and set him adrift. While in 1631, Thomas James led another expedition, as James Bay is named after him. Then in 1629 the English captured Quebec, but it was returned to France in 1632. And in 1670 the English founded the Hudson Bay Company, as the company was given exclusive rights to trade with the inhabitants of the Hudson Bay area. They traded with those native of Tula for skins and furs, while the rivalry between the British and the French in Canada continued. And after the War of Spanish Succession in 1701 to 1713, France was forced to recognise British control of Hudson Bay and Newfoundland, as the French were also forced to cede Nova Scotia to Britain. However, more conflicts between Britain and France was inevitable, and during the 7-Year War between 1756 to 1763, the two nations fought for control in Canada, for control of Canada, and in 1758 the British captured the French fortress of Louisbourg on Cape Breton Island, and in 1759 British General Wolfe captured the city of Quebec, as Wolfe's victory in Quebec ensured that Canada would become British rather than French. And in 1760 the British captured Montreal, and finally in 1763 the French were forced to surrender all of their territories in Canada to Britain by the Treaty of Paris, as the British were then left with the problem of how to deal with the French Canadians. Wisely, they decided to treat them with gently, and the Quebec Act of 1774 allowed the French Canadians to practice their own religion of Roman Catholicism, as the French Canadians were also allowed to keep French civil law alongside the British criminal law. And in 1775 the Canadian population had reached 90,000, as the colony was flourishing. And when the American Revolution began in 1775, the Americans hoped the French Canadians would join them, but they were disappointed as the American army entered Canada in September 1775 and captured Montreal in November. However, an attempt to capture Quebec in December failed, and the Americans' soldiers retreated in 1776. And after the American Revolutionary War, about 40,000 Americans who remained loyal to Britain migrated to the newly independent country of Canada. And in 1791, the British Parliament passed another act which divided the Lawrence River Valley into two parts, Upper and Lower Canada, which became kind of like Nova Scotia and New Brunswick, which were not affected. While the exploration continued, as George Vancouver, who lived from 1757 to 1798, sailed along the west coast of Canada. In 1781 to 94, as Vancouver Island is named after him, as Alexander Mackenzie from 1755 to 1820 travelled from Great Slave Lake along the Mackenzie River and reached the Arctic Ocean in 1789. In 1793 he crossed the continent by land and reached the Pacific Ocean. And during the American War of 1812 the Americans invaded Canada but were repulsed. Meanwhile, in the 19th century the population of Canada grew rapidly, as a result of migration from Britain, as the shipbuilding industry flourished in Canada and canals were built to help commerce. But in the 19th century many became dissatisfied with the government, and in 1791 both Lower and Upper Canada were allowed to elect a legislature, but the king appointed councils with executive powers. Yet both France and English-speaking Canadians wanted a more democratic form of government, and eventually in 1837 some Canadians rebelled, as Louis-Joseph Papineau led an uprising of French Canadians. but the rebellion was soon crushed, and in Upper Canada, William Leon Mackenzie, who became the first mayor of Toronto in 1834, led the insurrection, as in 1837 he led an uprising which was quickly crushed, as he himself was killed. But Canada was finally gained democratic government in 1867, when Ontario, Quebec, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick were federated as a Dominion of Canada. As Canada then had a strong central government, which was ruled from Ottawa, which was the new capital, as the first Prime Minister of Canada was Sir John Macdonald. As Manitoba was made a province in 1870 as British Columbia, joined a year later in 1871 as Alberta, and Saskatchewan joined in 1905. And during the late 19th century and early 20th century, the population of Canada grew even more rapidly, and then as the economy also expanded rapidly due to the spread of railways, as the Transcontinental Railway, the Canadian Pacific Railway, was completed in 1885. As many Britons migrated to Canada in the early 20th century, as many Eastern Europeans also migrated there as well, as vast areas of land was turned over to farming and manufacturing industry boomed, while in 1896 the gold was found in Klondike districts of Yukon, and there was a subsequent gold rush. And by the end of the First World War, 60,000 Canadian men had died, while Manitoba was the first province of Canada to allow women to vote in the provincial elections of 1916, as women in Canada were given a right to vote in federal elections in 1918, and by 1925 all provinces except Quebec had granted women the right to vote in provincial elections, but they finally gave in 1940. And in the 1920s were generally prosperous years, but like the rest of the world, Canada suffered during the Depression during the 1930s, but they suffered from a huge drop in exports in timber, grain and fish, and in 1933 unemployment soared to about 23%, as government introduced relief work, but economic hardships continued, as the Depression only ended when the Second World War began in 1939, and in that war 45,000 Canadians were killed. And in the late 1920s, in the late 20th century, the population grew rapidly once again, and by 1951 the population was about 16 million, and by 10 years later in 61 it had risen to 18 million. And after 1940, people from Southern and Eastern Europe flocked to live in Canada, and from 1960s many immigrants came from South Asia. Meanwhile, during the 50s and 60s, the economy boomed in Canada, and Canada became more of an affluent society, as television began in 1952, but things turned sour in the 70s. And in the 80s, Canada suffered a recession and unemployment rose to 11%. And there was another one in the early 1990s, but they were able to recover. And in 1995, the people of Quebec voted in a referendum not to secede from Canada. And in 1999, the North and West Territories was divided into two new territories, and a new territory which was called Nunavut, which was created, and in 1993 Kim Campbell became the first female Prime Minister of Canada. Like other countries, Canada suffered from the 2009 recession. However, Canada soon recovered, and in April 2012 unemployment in Canada stood at about 8.1%. But by September 2013 it had fallen to 6.9%. As today Canada is pretty much a prosperous country and with vast natural resources. And as of 2018, the population stood at about 37 million. So yeah, that is kind of what you say. Bye for now.